We're going to start now Sim Kuf Chaf Gimel. Till now, for the past a year, we've been doing Sim Kuf Yudalad. Kuf Yudalad also talks about having things to do with wine and alcoholic beverages. There, we focus more on the alcoholic beverages. And as we saw in Kuf Yudalad, there were all kinds of other Kashrus related things that fell into the Simon. And we're now going to do Sim Kuf Chaf Gimel. Kuf Chaf Gimel is the first of about 15 simanim in Shulchan Aruch about wine. We are not going to do all those simanim. The plan is to just do Sim Kuf Chaf Gimel. But we're going to try to wrap into Sim Kuf Chaf Gimel things that seem relevant from other simanim. Like, for example, the first 9 halachas of Sim Kuf Chaf Daled have to do with different kinds of people who can make things into stam yayin. And in Mitzvah we're going to do that next time, and probably the time afterwards also, because it fits into Kuf Chaf Gimel. So we'll try to the things that seem most relevant to us from the latest siman, we'll try to squeeze in to this siman in places where they sort of fit in. Okay, so for today, I want to do 2 things. First is just an introduction about wine-related things. Can you not put up the shades? Okay. So those are fine. Just these have to stay down.
I don't know how to do it.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat some things that we said way at the beginning when we first started this whole series at the beginning of Kuf Yudal. Okay, and that's like this. The way you produce alcohol, you may remember these slides. The way you produce alcohol is you take some kind of a sugar, what we call in layman's terms sugar, some kind of a sugar. You add yeast to it, and it turns into alcohol. Okay, that's how all alcoholic beverages are made. Every single one of them. Okay, but the difference is what you put into it, what kind of sugar you use, and what kind of things you do after you've turned it into alcohol. Those create all the different types of alcohol that we're familiar with. This time we're only going to do the one that's most relevant to us because we're talking about wine. Sim Kuf Chaf Gimel is very much about wine. There will be a little alcohol at the end, but basically wine. And that is, if you put in grapes, if the sugar source that you have is grapes, which is going to be how soon as about, then what comes out of that, and you don't do anything else afterwards, after the alcohol you don't do anything, then you're left with wine. Okay? You may remember from our slides way back when, that you could use different sources of sugar, and you could do different things afterwards to create different things in the end. But for us, this is the very simplest way to make alcohol. The sugar comes from grapes. You squeeze grapes, they have sugar in them. Grapes actually have yeast on their peels, so you don't even have to add yeast really if you don't want to. And it turns into alcohol.
What turns into alcohol?
The sugar. The sugar
turns into alcohol.
Sugar of alcohol is converted to alcohol. If you remember way back when, I think I even put up the...
Is any part of the wine converted into alcohol? It's just the sugar turns into alcohol.
I don't see what you meant by that. Is any part of the wine turns into alcohol? Wine is grape juice that turns into alcohol. So wine is, we take grape juice.
The shadow about making a guffen and using wine for kiddush, using grape juice for kiddush. You can't turn into alcohol, right? So I read some articles that said, grape juice has passed through there, it can turn into alcohol. And sugar and yeast.
In Mitzvah, we're going to get to that. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a few halach, maybe halach gimel or
dal. Sugar, what's the big deal? Like do with the water too.
We're going to talk about that. I think it's halach gimel or dal. Okay, we're going to talk about that. Yeah, we're going to get to that. Okay, but yes, you can do to sugar. Yes, your grape juice will turn that into wine. So, we're going to talk all about wine. In the Torah, there's 2 words for wine, yayin and shecher. The Gemara has different shittas, 3 different opinions as to what the difference between yayin and shecher are. What's important for us is that the term yayin means any juice that comes out of grapes. Okay, it doesn't have to be alcoholic. It doesn't have to be wine. Okay, even grape juice is also considered to be wine. Also, again, the different shittas in the Gemara, we talked about that way back then, about what the shittas are. But the word yayin just refers to the juice that comes out of grapes. Okay? So before I pass on to I'm going to show you in a second the different stages that there are. I just want to throw something in that we did not talk about before, and that is that there's, I can have a slide about it, and that is there's something called currants. Okay? And they are, before I tell you what they are, I'm going to tell you what they're not. Okay? They are. They are something that look like small grapes. Okay? And the term people use currants sometimes to refer to small grapes. So just to show you what they are, this is what a grapevine looks like. Okay? This is what a grapevine looks like. You're not really seeing the whole tree. This is a description. This is like a picture, a drawing of what the tree would look like. Okay? It's got a trunk. Okay? And then growing out of the trunk, on the top of it are these branches that come out, from which vines come out that the grapes grow on. And you see over here in the picture what looks like the grapes growing on here, as opposed to a currant does not grow on which does not grow on anything like that tree at all. It grows on a small bush, and it doesn't grow in the same kind of clusters like grapes. So the resulting, the black currants, at least a little bit, they look like grapes. They have some kind of, but they're considered to be a berry, and they're not considered anything to do with grapes at all. The juice that comes out of currants is not wine. It doesn't have any of those in them. But I mentioned it because, first of all, because people confuse them, but also companies or manufacturers will use those words. Sometimes they use the word currant when they're talking really about a small grape, or they're talking about a raisin, and they'll call it a currant also. Okay, so just something to be aware of, that if someone's using currants, that you have to make sure they're really using currants, which usually they are, but when they say black currants, they mean really these, as opposed to, there are other colors of currants, and there are some people who use, when they're talking about real raisins or real grapes, they use the word currant, just something to be aware of, because currant juice is nothing. There's no special Kashrus sensitivities to it. But grape juice, of course, there is. Okay. So we can break up the making of wine into 3 stages. Okay? And they're like this. The first stage is called must. Okay? Must means you crush grapes, and the grapes and the juice are mixed together. Okay? That's called must. Okay? What's defining for us is what's going to be. It's going to come in Sif Yud Zayin. The big, important piece of information you have to know about wine is that while you mix fruit and juice together, it doesn't have any din of wine. The din of wine doesn't start until something called hamshacha. Hamshacha means is when you separate the liquid from the pulp. When the liquid starts to separate, that's when it has the din of wine. Until hamshacha happens, it's not. So when it's in the must stage, what this is called must, when just grapes and liquid mixed together, it's not wine. Can't become stam yayin. It doesn't have any din of wine at that point. Okay? So this is not yayin at this point. But
even if they grind up the grapes also, right?
That's true. That's crushed grapes. The grapes are crushed up.
Ground and blended and other like.
Right. As long as the liquid hasn't separated yet. Now we'll see when we get later on in the simon.
But I take a cup and stick it in and draw some liquid.
Then if you draw out some liquid, that's wine. And once you get hamshacha, then the rest we'll see later. The whole rest of it will not also be considered to have had hamshacha. But as long as it all mixed together safely, then nothing has separated, it's not considered wine. It's just fruit juice. It's just crushed up grapes. As soon as you separate it, that's when it gets the din of wine, and it has all the chumras that we're going to find out, or the dinim of wine, like from Kiddush, all those things have to do with once you separate it, okay? So must is the stage before hamshacha. Okay? Then there's the early stage of wine. Okay? The early stage of wine, Chazal talk about either takes 3 days or 40 days, two parts to it, and that is when it first comes out, okay, it's yayin mikitoi. Okay, when it first comes out, it's grape juice. Okay, that's considered wine in din. As soon as you have hamshacha, it's considered yayin. Okay, that's
that picture of.
I'm going to show you this. I'm going to tell you that in a second. Okay. The first thing that comes out is grape juice. As soon as you have hamshacha, it has grape juice. It already has a din of wine. The next stage is for 3 days. Is tasisa. That's what you're seeing over there. Okay, and that is the conditions are so ripe. There's so much sugar and water, and all the things are just right that for the first, and the pH is good. That for the first 3 days, the Gemara says the fermentation is furious. You see bubbling, frothing in the juice. That's what you see in the picture there. Okay, so the tasisa, the strong fermentation has happened for the first few days. And then the Gemara says the rest of the fermentation, the stretched out, the rest of the full fermentation, the Gemara says 40 days. Nowadays, we don't see that it takes a full 40 days. Okay? It seems to take less than that for us, but it takes a few more weeks. Okay, so the first few days is a very strong tasisa, and then afterwards it goes on for the rest of the time. Yes?
I'm just a little confused. In the second picture,
the one that you see there?
Right, that hamshacha has already taken place?
Yes. Yes.
How come it looks like there's grapes?
So, in depending on the kind of wine you're making, you may leave peels and grapes inside of it also. Okay, depending, you may or may not leave things in there. Okay, but it's for our purposes. You're right. In this picture, you don't see the hamshacha so clearly, but there was a hamshacha here by now. Okay.
So the hamshacha was because some of the grapes were
some of the juice was separated out. As soon as the juice starts to be pulled out.
Did they take out the juice or take out the pulp? Just out of curiosity.
I don't remember. Okay.
We'll think
drain it out. Drain out the juice. Yeah. Okay. So that's the second stage. Okay, at this point, once we're in this stage, it's already this is already considered wine. Okay, and then the last stage is a mature wine, or what we call chamar atik, like the targum for shecher. Another can't yayin v'shecher, so he can't need chamar atik. That's what it's called, or yayin yoshan. Okay, and that's it's already a made wine. Okay, and then it can age further
yayin is not mature wine. Yayin is not mature wine.
Right, so that's what we talked about. There are three sheets in the Gemara. What didn't see yayin and shecher is. This is yayin, and this is shecher. Okay, a different sheet is in the Gemara about what yayin and shecher means. What yayin and shecher means is, so when it says chamar chadas v'atik, and that's what the Targum says for what a nosy can have, chadas v'atik, that's what it means. So the finished wine, there's no more alcohol, no more alcohol being made, whatever it is, that's what it is. But it still gets better. Okay, it still improves with age. As you know, wines improve with age. And so the regular fermentation is over. If you don't do it correctly, it'll ferment a second time. A different fermentation will turn to vinegar. Okay, so that second, it could ferment again, but that would be bad. Okay, so for the second, this is aging. It's already, the wine is finished, and it can just get worse. Better.
One other thing I want to make sure I understand. Is it possible to go through the tisa and the aging without hamshacha at all? As well as if you just leave it mixed together.
I guess you could. I don't know. I guess you can. Okay.
Are there 4 steps or 3 steps?
There's 3 steps. There are three stages. I don't even call it steps. There's a lot of steps. I wasn't breaking down by. I'm breaking down by these different. This is not wine, and these 2 are wine. That's how I'm breaking it down. You know what I mean? This is when it becomes wine. It's once it crosses this line, it's wine, and then this is the time when it turns into alcohol, and it's finished being alcohol. There's no more, the alcohol is done already at this point.
So
okay.
The fermentation just stops?
It runs out. Okay, it runs out. The pH gets too high, the sugar runs low, so it doesn't work anymore. The yeast stops doing.
End up having around the same alcohol content?
Yeah, so regular wine, you can get things to be like 12, 13, 14, 15%, at which point it plotses. So then to make things that are higher alcohol, that's what we talked about way back at the beginning, there are ways to make it higher alcohol, but you can't make more alcohol. You could concentrate and things like that. It's finished, it's over. You can't.
What's happening when wine is improving with age?
What did you say?
What's happening when wine is improving?
I have no idea. Okay. The interaction of the wood and the tannins and I have no idea. Okay, something happens. It gets better.
Like kind of throw.
Right, I have no idea. Well, I have no idea. Okay, yeah, I'm a great.
It'll get better in a glass bottle?
In a glass bottle, I don't think so. I don't think so. Okay, so now before we go on to our second thing, I just wanted to tell you that when in learning through these halachas, there aren't so many svarim written on these halachas. Not so many people care, I guess, except for people who make wine. So I use 2 svarim that I've been using, that I found very useful. And the first is a sefer. This sefer that you see on the screen is called Beis Yayin. Okay, Beis Yayin is written, and so Beis Yayin is broken into 2 parts. It's a pirush. It's a halachas on top with a pirush on the bottom. It's written by somebody named Reb Tzvi Hirsch Gudzinski. He's a cousin or a second cousin of Reb Chaim Ozer. He was a rav in Omaha, Nebraska, and he wrote the sefer about 100 years ago. But it was never printed until a couple of years ago. Somebody from Muncie somehow got a hold of his notes. I think that if I understand they were in a museum, if I understand correctly, in a university. I'm not sure where they were, but somebody in Muncie got a hold of it and printed a really very fine job on printing the sefer. The top of the sefer is halachas, and the halachas are almost word for word from Shulchan Aruch and Chachmas Adam. And on the bottom, he has like a little. He tells you on the bottom each set of words. So he says like 10 words, because these 3 words are from Shulchan Aruch and these 5 are from Chachmas Adam. There's someone on the bottom with a running, show you where it came from. But the main part of the sefer, really, aside from the organization of the sefer, the main part of the sefer is his pirush, which is called kunditun. Okay, that's the main part of the sefer. Now, I don't know if this is real, but that's a picture that they have of the person what he looks like who wrote the sefer. Whether that's really him, I have no idea. No, so actually, they show. I have another picture of him which I didn't put up here, which supposedly is what he looked like in Omaha, Nebraska. Tzvi Hirsch became Henry. Yeah, so Tzvi Hirsch in Omaha he was called Rabbi Henry Gudzinski. But so anyhow, this is what it's supposed to. I have no idea. Maybe it's the Chofetz Chaim, what he looks like. Anyhow, so that's supposedly what he looked like. Okay, so he wrote a number of other svarim also. If you saw him previously, he wrote a bunch of other svarim that are known. Okay, this is a new sefer, so to speak, that he wrote. But other svarim that he wrote on the sefer mikvois that's supposedly well known. Okay, now this name kunditun, just to understand what it is, the name kunditun it's a description of a type of wine people used to make. It's going to be brought in halacha daled. It's not going to use the word kunditun in halacha daled. The word kunditun is used in hilchos brachas. Okay, it's used in hilchos brachas, and what it means is kunditun is a kind of a wine that's mixed with honey and pepper, and black pepper. Okay, so it has honey and black pepper mixed with wine. We'll see in halacha daled all kinds of to-dos about exactly what it was made and the special dinner that it has to it. Again, the word kunditun doesn't appear in halacha daled, but that's what it's talking about the same thing. And the Gra tells you to go look at a medrash that says the following, okay? And the medrash says like this. Amar Rab Avon, okay, Divrei Torah nimshlu b'kunditin, okay? Divrei Torah compared to kunditin. Ma kunditin hazeh, yesh bo yayin, yesh bo dvash, and yesh bo pilpulin. That's what you make kunditin out of. It's wine, honey, and black pepper. Ach Divrei Torah yesh ben yayin, yesh ben dvash, and yesh ben pilpulin. Okay, so it has these three things in it. Okay, and the medrash brings a pasuk for each one of those things. Okay, so you see yesh ben yayin because the pasuk keeps telling the dechem yayin, and yesh ben dvash because it says in the sukkah midvash. Okay, but yesh ben pilpulin, there's no pasuk that says that Torah has pilpulin in it. Okay, so the medrash brings a pasuk that says trufa and rascha ma'od. Okay, that's a tzadi pasuk in Kufites. It's not a pilpulin pasuk. Okay, so what I think that means is, and you'll see why I'm telling you that. What it means is trufa and rascha ma'od means is that kesef tzoruf, like you've got to away all the impurities and you have just the ikr thing by itself. So what the medrash is saying, for sure, according to what he calls his pirush kunditon, is that in his pirush, he has, of course, yayin, it's all about wine, and it has dvash, it has sweet things in it also, but also has pilpul, okay, things to clarify the din, pilpulin. So Divrei Torah don't have pilpulin as in black peppers, Divrei Torah have pilpulin in order to make truf and rasmoy, to make the Torah clear, so that the Torah is clear because people are...
Tell me one other place you find in Chazal the concept of pilpul.
I have no idea.
As we use it in.
I have no idea, but look at the mentions. Yes, but it says true from us. And that's why I thought he called this pirush kunditon, because it's of course all about wine. It has sweet things in it. It has lots of pilpul in it. Not pilpul like to clarify the din. It's exactly what this pasuk is, to clarify, to explain the din. He says on the top, he has these all kinds of explanations. I thought it's done very well. I've been using this wording from the Sefer. So that's my shot in the medrash. I don't know if that's the truth, but that's my shot in the medrash. Okay, anyhow. And the other sefer I always use is a sefer from someone from France, who I don't know anything about him. What? He's from France? Yeah, but his previous sefer was Sedat Gittin. So, I don't know what to... But anyhow, but it's a sefer from someone in France, also done very well. His is written in a little bit of a different style. His has a lot of modern applications. You know, the rabbi from Omaha, I guess what was modern for him is what he spoke about, but, because he does talk about some things that he says, like in California they're making wine this and this ways, which I don't know if they do that anymore. But this person, this Yayin Malchus, someone from France, who has lots of things to say about modern things, and it's written in a different way anyhow. It's very interesting. Anyway, this sefer I got monoed by mistake. Okay, I ordered that sefer from the store.
Rashawn was still he needed to go to some wine thing.
Yeah.
I don't know, 10 years ago. So I got a sefer for it. Anyway, it never happened.
Okay, so you have it. So I actually ordered this sefer. I ordered the base yayin, and instead I got the Yayin Malchus. And I said you sent me the wrong sefer. So we wrote something out like that, both of them. Yeah, so I have both of them. And it is I've been enjoying it. Okay. So now the second part of what we have to say, and that is like this. If you were reading the Shulchan Aruch at the beginning, the Shulchan Aruch tells us that stam yayin is asur b'achil and asur b'hana. Stam yayin she'oiv dikachom asur b'hana. Okay. Stam yayin is asur b'achil and asur b'hana. Okay, so the question is, why did Chazal make stam yayin asur? Okay, why did they say that you're not allowed to have stam yayin? What's the reason for that? It's a mishnah that you're not allowed to have stam yayin. It's asur b'achil b'hana. The question is, why did they make it asur? So the mishnah is a chav testament base says you're not allowed to have it, and there's l'chayra a steer in the Gemara. The Rishonim talk about, there's a steer in the Gemara. Okay, and that is like this. The Gemara Chav Testament base, right after the Mishnah, the first word after the Mishnah says, Yayin Minon, why is Yayin Asr? Okay? And the Gemara says it is because Ma Zebach Asr Bahana, Af Yayin Asr Naim Bahana. Okay? And it's clear from the Gemara. It's not, the Gemara is that pasuk. This drasha, the Gemara says over here, is not talking about Stam Yayin. It's talking about Yayin Nesech. Okay, Stam Yayin and Yayin Nesech is not the same thing. Stam Yayin is, if a guy owns wine, that's called Stam Yayin. The Stam wine from a guy is Asr. That's Asr. That's what the Mishnah said. That's not what the Gemara said. The Gemara says, how do we know that Yayin Nesech is Asr? Because the Gemara makes drashas that just like a carbon is Asr B'hana, also Yayin Nesech is also Asr B'hana. Okay, and I didn't tell you the whole Gemara. The Gemara has all kinds of, how do we know it? That's, carbon is Asr B'hana, blah, 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 whatever. But, so here the Gemara says that the reason why Yayin Nesech is Asr is because it has something to do, it's compared to a carbon. The implication of the Gemara is that the reason why Stam Yayin is Asr is because it has some connection to Yayin Nesech. Okay, this is the first word of the Gemara, right after the Mishnah said stam yayin is usher. It tells you why yayin nesach is usher. The Gemara doesn't say this, but the implication is pretty strong that the reason why stam yayin is usher is because there's maybe if you have stam yayin, maybe it will really be yayin nesach. That's the implication of the Gemara. That's all the Gemara says, and then the Gemara goes on to something else. Okay, so the reason why stam yayin is usher seems to be because it has a concern. Maybe it's yayin nesach. That's the first Gemara. Okay, that's one Gemara. Then the Gemara says, Alamed Vav base. Okay, if you plot later, the Gemara says, how come yayin is asr? So the Gemara says it's part of the Yud Ches Davar, the 18 things that Hillel and Shammai asr. Gosu al pitan v'shmanan mishum yenam. Pas akum and shem and akum are asr. It's going to come up a few times. Shem and akum was asr. They retracted that isr. But at that time, they asr pas akum and shem and akum mishum yenam. And what's wrong with yayin? About yayin mishum b'nei and yayin is also mishum because of chasnas, because it might lead to intermarriage. Okay, so there's a theory here. Okay, the Rishonim ask what's kasha. Well, what's going on? Is it issa because it's a chashash of yayin issa, or is it issa because of a chashash of chasnas? I mean, which one is it? Okay, that's one question. Okay, that's the most glaring question. And then the second question is that if the issa is mishum chasnas, why would it be issa b'hana? All the other things that we know that are asa mishum chasnas, like pas hakum and bishul hakum and grenas hakum, all those things that are asa mishum, well, not because of chasnas, but pas hakum and bishul hakum that are asa mishum chasnas and shemen hakum are only asa b'achil, they're not asa b'hana. So why would this one be asa b'hana and none of the other things are asa b'hana? Okay, that's the second question. So we're going to see the way I see it. There are three different answers to this question. Okay. I don't know if it was easy, but the Torah and B'Sheis and that pretty much have different to-dos about who holds exactly which shita, but there's three answers to this question, okay? Again, we have a steer, the Gemara Lamed Vav, just for me it was easier to organize it this way. The Gemara Lamed Vav says the Isra Mishum Chasnas, the Gemara Chavtes says it's Asr Mishum Yayin Nesach. Okay, so which one is? Okay, so what I'm calling the Ramban and the Torah, we question whether that is or not. Say like this. Really, the Chashash that you would have yayin nesach is almost nil. There's almost no possible chashash that you're really going to have yayin nesach. So the Ran says either stam, it's very uncommon to pour wine for avodah zarah. The Ran says if they did it for the avodah zarah, you think they're going to go sell it in the supermarket then? If you use it for your avodah zarah, you think that's respectful? They take their wine from avodah zarah and then go sell it to somebody else? Nah, it wouldn't be like that. Okay, so the chashash of having real yayin nesach is almost zero. Okay, so the reason why Chazal asked wine is not really because of yayin nesach. The reason why they asked wine is because of chasnas. That's the reason why they asked it. The problem is, if they make it issa because of chasnas, and they make stam yayin asa mishum chasnas and only asa ba'achila, then it's going to be really confusing for people, because they're going to see that's going to be asa mishum chasnas and it's mutter b'hana. They're going to have yayin nesach, which is going to be asa b'hana. They're going to get confused, and they're going to start thinking that yayin nesach is also asa b'hana. So in order to make this not be confusing and not make mistakes happen, Chazal said, we're going to structure our takana to be a chashash of yayin nesach. That's not why they made the takana. The reason why they made the takana was mishum chasnas. But they pretend, the way we structured it is, don't eat stam yayin because it's a chashash of yayin nesach. It's not a real chashash, but that's the structure of the din in order to be able to say, and therefore it's asa b'hana, so that there wouldn't be this confusion. Okay? So the Ramban, and we'll call the Torah, say, the reason, when the Gemara Lamed Vav says it's Mishum Chasnas, that's what Chazal had in mind. That's what they were thinking. Why should we make this Asr? I'll peek the Mishum Yainam, I'll Yainam Mishum B'nai. What was the structure? How did they set up the Takana? They set up the Takana to be a Chashash of Yayin Nesach because they wanted to make it Asr B'Hana. They didn't want people to be confused. Because if this would be Mutter B'Hana, people would think that Yayin Nesach was also Mutter B'Hana. Because wine and wine, treif wine is Mutter B'Hana. They would think Yayin Nesach is also Mutter B'Hana. So in order to not have that confusion, they said, we'll make it all Asr B'Hana. Okay? So they said, let's pretend it's Chashash of Yayin Nesach. Okay, but Chashash, not a real Chashash of Yayin Nesach. Okay, so in my mind, I call it this is it was a one step, but the reason is this, and the structure is like this. Okay. The Ran, we call the Ran, the document, the way he understands the Ran, says like this. He says, no, different shot. Really, the whole Takonas Chachanim is Mishum B'nai. The whole Takana is Mishum B'nai. The Halal, don't drink wine because of Chasnas. That was the whole reason for the Takana. And that's not also Mahana. There's no Isachana on that food, to eat that. The Chazal warned you that you should know, if you eat stam yayin, you may end up eating yayin nesach also. So therefore, you should be careful and don't make it asr b'hana, because you might actually have yayin nesach also. So it's not that it was a real, it was a takana takana to be considered to be yayin nesach, it's a warning. He compares it to the din of gilui. Okay, in Simon Kuf Yudzayin, Kuf Tazayin, there's a din of gilui. You now have water that was or wine that was uncovered because a snake might have put poison into it. The way we paskin is that it's not a takana, it's not an isser to drink uncovered water. Chazal are warning you, you should just know that there are snakes around. Meaning, if you come to a place where there's no snakes, like in Chicago, we don't have snakes crawling around drinking out of our water, then you don't have to be cautious for this thing. The Chazal didn't make it isser to drink water, they were just cautioning you and telling you, be careful about this thing, look before you cross the street, and don't drink water because there might be venom inside of it.
You make it isser, right?
No, the real Gila is not. We pass them now, if they would have made isser, you would be...
No. But in the case where there is such a chash, even though they were just being with Gil, you didn't see it. In the case where there is a chash, you don't have the permission to say, listen, it's not a real sakana. I evaluated it, it's not a real sakana because of the number. I don't know, whatever the analysis you did, it's not a real sakana. I would do something with equivalent statistics. I would do. You can't remember right to do it. The Chazal was second in this place. You have to be chayshish for it, right?
So by Gil,
but they had a reason. It has a very specific reason. If the reason truly doesn't apply, then it's worth it.
Okay, so we could word it different ways, but the way this shot is learning is the takana, the part that's a takana that you can't get away from is an Isra Chilim Shum Chasnus. The other part is more of a caution to the extent that if it would be that there is really no chashash of yayin nesach, if there really is no chashash yayin nesach, the takana might not apply. Now we're going to talk about next time whether the chashash of avodah zarah and the Israel really applies nowadays. Okay, but at least we're open to a possibility, which is the only takana. The takana is mishum chasnus, and it's also about chila. But what about the yayin nesach element of it? The Chazal were warning us. Be aware that there could be such a thing. You have to be cautious for such a possibility, which means to say is it could be that there will be there will be a time that it will not apply. Okay, it's opening up the ability to say this is not the second half. The chashash yayin nesach and the isra hana may not be. It's not a takana and it may not be permanent. Okay, it may not be like it may not always do it.
Are they openly arguing at each other?
So
you just read it.
The Beverages and the commercial are argued. Both of these are the Ran. Okay, this is the way the Beverages runs around. This is the way the document runs around. Okay, it's not clear that they're arguing each other. Okay. But this first chat, I wrote Ramban / Torah, but it's really the Ramban and the Ran with Beverages runs it. And what the Torah says also. This is the way the Ran learns the document. By no means is it clear that they're arguing these things. Okay, but we're going to see more about that next time. Okay, by no means is it clear. I'm telling you the way they said it. Okay. Okay, so according to both of these, the Gemara Lamed Vav is the reason for the takana. That was the reason for the takana. According to the first shot, it's just the takana was the reason was mishum chasnus, but it was set up as isra yayin nesach. And according to the second shot, it's the takana is mishum chasnus, and then there's a second. The Chazal said, be aware that there's a problem of yayin nesach. Okay, the Rashba says a third shot. Okay, the Rashba says that the reason why there's two Gemaras, one says Mishum Chasnus and one says Mishum Yayin Nesach, is because the takana was made in two steps. The first step I told you, Mishum Chasnus, is from the Yud Ches Davar. Hillel and Shammai made the takana that you can't eat stam yayin Mishum Chasnus. In fact, Rashba says, 2 times beforehand, the Chachmei Hador tried to make such a takana also. Okay, one is Pinchas. Okay, Pinchas tried to ask for wine and it was not miskabel. People did not accept it. And the second time was Daniel. In Sefer Daniel, it says that he decided he was some aliboy not to eat yayin mishtayon. And the Gemara has a machlokes what he did when he did that. Did he really make a takana and people didn't do it, or did he just have it in mind? He had a thought, an idea. Some aliboy, he had this idea, but Daniel also tried to make an Isser on Stam Yayin. It didn't end up being a real takana. And Hillel and Shammai came along with Yud Ches Davar, and they answered it, Mishum Chasnus. That was the first takana. That was takana number 1. It was Asr Mishum Chasnus, like all other foods. Like all other foods that we know of that are Asr Mishum Chasnus. Then came along a later Bezin, and decided there's a second Isser. They added another Isser. After the first is Mishum Chasnus, they added a later Isser, which is Mishum Yayin Nesach. Okay, so the first, it took some time, until eventually Hillel and Shammai were masakin that the Isser Mishum B'nai, and then a later Bezin made the other Isser. So why does the Mishnah say it's also about milk? Because the Mishnah is telling you the truth. By this point, there are 2 Issurim on it. But the Gemara has two things in the Gemara because they're not steer to each other. It's one is after the other. They're in backwards order. That's why I put it like this. They're backwards order. The Gemara Lamed Vav tells you the original takana, and the Gemara right after the Mishnah tells you the final takana, the second takana there is. Okay. Okay. So the three shittas that we have over here, the way I call them is the first shot is that it's a one-step takana. Okay. It's one step, and the whole thing is the reason is Mishum Kashrus, the structure is Mishum yayin. Okay, the second shot is that it's two steps. Okay, the first step is there's a takana, don't drink Mishum Kashrus, and then there's like a secondary thing which is be cautious. Okay, and the third shot, the Rashba, is that there are two stages. It's two completely different takanas. There's takana number one, is achila, takana number two, is hana. Okay. So Mirz Hashem, next time we're going to talk about whether that Isra Hana really is nowadays. Okay, that's a very, again, halacha, it's right here in the first din. It's very negated to us. Mirz Hashem next time. And whether it's connected to these shittas, whether these shittas have, how they play into whether there's Isra Hana or not. Okay,
the Gemara is clearly Asabano. There's no two ways
about it. It's a Mishnah. The Mishnah is in the second paragraph. Some things are Asabachila and some things are Asabano. It's in the Mishnah and the things are Asabana. Okay, Shulchan Aruch starts off, stam yayin shal amlim adicham Asabana. That's the first thing, because that's fair Mishnah. Okay, we're going to see the Ramah talks about that, and lots to say about that. The Gemara itself gives examples of times when yayin nesach is not asabana. It's not such a foreign thing, but the Mishnah says it's asabana. There are lots of other things that talk about maybe it's not always asabana. Blah, blah, blah. That's what we're going to talk about. Okay, now one last thing is that we when you hear all kinds of chashashas of yayin nesach, misvara, you would think that only applies to stam yayin. It only applies to the wine that belongs to a guy. A guy's wine, you go to the store and you buy Welsh grape juice, stam yayin. It belongs to a guy, it has a chashash of yayin nesach, a possibility of yayin nesach. What happens if the guy touches my wine? I have a bottle of wine, he walks in and touches it. It's not yayin nesach. He can't be yayin nesach, he just touched it. He didn't have the wine. Back in the day, made a yayin nesach. So by logic, we might have thought that there would not be yayin nesach. It's not true. Well, it's not simply true. The Torah says, "V'chmiru lesser bahana afilu maga goy b'yayin shalanu." Not only is the logic on stam yayin, but even if the guy touches my wine, it's also usher. Okay, that's what the Torah says. That's how the Torah says it. And the Beverages says, "Pashut b'kama duchtim nimsechas avodah." That's obvious. Okay, you should know pashut, and that's what Shulchan Aruch says. Stam yayin shal amlim odik kacham usher bahana v'hu adin u'magon b'yayin shalanu. V'hu adin means is, when they touch our wine, by logic, it shouldn't be Isra of there shouldn't be chashash of yayin nesach. They're just touching my wine. How can he make yayin nesach? But that's not the truth. The truth is that it's also. Okay. And
we're like his wine that he didn't touch.
There's no such thing. What do you mean his wine he didn't touch?
He was sold to him, and I know he didn't touch it.
So, if he had and didn't touch it, we'll talk about that.
Does yayin nesach actually have to have been used for the nesifa?
Yayin nesach means that it was poured for the avodah.
That's just looks on the nesifa, but
right. It was poured for the avodah. It was poured for the avodah. Yeah.
For the run back, I'm not sure that would make sense, right?
Because
there's no chash.
So that we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk in the future a couple times about. Well, does everyone really agree to that? Does it apply in every case? Is that true? That the din of stam yayin and yayin that a guy touched, my one that he touched, are they the same thing? We're going to find out that not necessarily are they always the same thing. Okay, the Shulchan Aruch starts like that. The Torah says the Beverages says pasha b'kama duchti, but we're going to see that the wine that my wine, his wine, and my wine that he touched don't always get the same status. Okay, again, the logic, the Torah already warns us that the logic doesn't apply there. What's the chashash of yayin nesach on my wine? He touched my wine. He sat at my table, touched my wine. What's the yayin nesach? But it's not true. He doesn't also, but we'll see. Maybe really is true.